and especially in light of the truth and the reality, we should be celebrating resurrection all the time. Huh? Yeah. Jesus is doing something new. He's promised He's doing a new thing. And so that means like every day, all the time, something new is happening. And you don't always see what it is as being a good thing. And let me just give you a little example. Just about 2 weeks ago, we discovered when a neighbor walked by and saw water running down the street and called us and said they thought a hose was left on, that I had Bruce go over and check, and when he opened the door, he was working at your house, Dorothy, he opened the door to the preschool and water was up to the threshold in the two big rooms. Okay, so God's doing a new thing. And I found myself just saying this the other day because when I shared it with one of the ladies in the Thursday morning thing, she was, oh, I said, no, it's a good thing. This old building like the one that burnt down is being renewed, and that's what we pay for insurance for. And so that whole space is going to be just cleaned out and all kind, new floor. There's it's not the tile itself, it's the adhesive under 2 layers of tile that has asbestos in it. It's lead paint in the walls. It's no insulation in the walls. It's all kinds of problems that are going to be... No, the building across the way. Yeah, the mold that was pre-existing is going to be treated, and to whatever extent. The termites that we see have eaten into... Now, they don't take care of all that stuff, but we have a shell that our contractor can go and address those kinds of things, plus do what's called for. And while we're at it, we're going to replace the flooring in your room. So you won't be able to meet there, gals. I say your room, it's our room too. There'll be a short period of time where you can't meet in there, because we're going to yank that stinky old carpet out of there, and we're going to deal with all of that stuff.
Put in really high shag?
High shag, yeah. You use a rake, right? Anybody ever have shag and you had to use a rake to rake it? Oh yeah, the fads that come and go. Behold, Jesus said, I make all things new. And so we want to celebrate Resurrection Sunday from an infinite, never-ending perspective, not with eternity beginning when, then, but being in eternity now. Living in eternity now, so it's time for us to get with the program of living in the Lord's presence with an eternal perspective. And so with that, I'll just open with a word of prayer and ask you once again, God, and thank you in advance that you are with us and that you want us to live this kind of a life. You invested your life in us so that we could live with you forever and ever. In Jesus' name we pray. Who's praying? Anybody? Amen. Amen. So I decided to call this Brown Bag Productions because that's what I put on the ad, something new, brown bag and a movie. And so the idea there was that so that we don't have to break up for some kind of a complicated, long potluck, that we can just take a little break, have some snacks, use the restroom, and come back and watch the movie Risen, because this is what the message plays into. This is the message of Resurrection Sunday, but we don't really spend enough time on it. And so often we just deal it in the historical context, the story, the holiday, that as soon as Easter comes into the phrase, the holiday becomes a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, it might be a Sunday brunch, might be an Easter egg hunt, it might be chocolates and a lot of things, but it quickly departs from the heart of the message. And so we're going to play this movie right after service, reasonable length of delay, and they're going to have free popcorn, lemonade, coffee, those kinds of things. And there's a rumor that pizza's going to arrive, which is the reason that Shirley is late. She's picking the pizza up at Costco, and so we've got that to look forward to. But to give you a little sampler and a taste, now, you might find the trailer to be a little harsh But remember, we're talking about Rome. We're talking about the things that led up to him being risen. And so you're going to get a little bit of that, but that's really not the whole content of the movie in terms of those special effects type of things. Here we go.
When the Messiah comes, Rome will be nothing.
We'll have closed captions.
The Nazarene city rise again after 3 days. Whose peace and order is true? Will the people believe it? The weak will. There will be no other gods. Kill him. The tomb is sealed. Guard with your life.
Terry, follow someone to you.
The body has vanished.
His tomb is empty.
Where has he gone? You tell me. Already there, proclaiming him risen from death.
The Emperor did not arrive to unrest. We must find the body.
Told the city the body's dead in the last week.
Take them up.
Everyone. His disciples were bearing his corpse. It was not his followers.
Another body, sir. Just a little.
No. Who told you Lazarus was alive? Mary Magdalene.
You're looking for something you'll never find. Open your heart and see.
No more lies. What happened to the body?
The ropes had just exploded.
You should have returned by now. I have seen two things which cannot reconcile. A man dead without question, and that same man alive again.
What's wrong with you? Being wrong. Wagering eternity on it.
You know, if you think about it, let's move past whatever that is. I'm calling this message Good News, Jesus Lives. You know, what is news? That's the new, latest events. That's what's happening. That's why it's called news. Good news. The good news is that Jesus lives. It's the daily news that we need to have inside of us. We need to look at this every morning. However you get your news, whenever you get your news, this is news that you need to refresh. Good news. Good news. It's the kind of news that's worthy of being shared. If it's polarizing, it's because Jesus said he would be an offense. Not because we're offensive and we need to be on guard against being offensive, because Christians can be very offensive. They can be very indelicate in how we express the good news. We can be very condemning with it. You know, and I've mentioned this before, at the top it says exclusive. That's so wrong. It's inclusive. The good news is inclusive. Isn't it? Are we? Yeah, and are we inclusive of those other people, those people? Those people. Are we inclusive of them? So today we're going to work with the harmony of the Gospels. So much of what happens in the Gospels and what I want to captivate today is just a segment of what happens after the resurrection. There's quite a big stir of what happens after the resurrection because it's intolerable for everyone who doesn't believe that this rumor that Jesus would rise from the dead. It's intolerable, unacceptable for there to be anything to carry that message forward. And boy, they had no idea how powerful that would be. They would think it's just about their here and now, their little place and their security and their power. but is so much bigger. And that's why we can look forward to Jesus coming back. The world is a mess, but Jesus is coming back. It's temporary. We're not to be overcome by it. Good news, we're going to be looking at it from the perspective of harmony of the Gospels, and I can't include all of it. I'll try and introduce with each segment a screen that says harmony of the Gospels and gives a reference. And towards that end, we will begin with John 20, 11 through 16. Now, you can look it up, but I'll be moving along, and so it might just be easier to follow, but you're certainly welcome to look in your own resources. John 20, 11, 16. John writes a lot about it. Mark, as usual, doesn't write so much, but all four gospel writers write about the resurrection and what happens afterwards. Here we go. John 20, 11 through 16. We're talking about Mary Magdalene here because she is the first one that Jesus revealed himself to. And it says, now Mary Magdalene stood outside the tomb crying. This is early in the morning that she goes to the tomb. Now, this is John's version. Other gospel records have her not going alone. She has other women accompanying her, but we're going to focus on Mary here per John. Now Mary, and I've added the Magdalene because it wasn't stated in the NIV, stood outside the tomb crying. She was distraught. She was disturbed. Her Savior, her friend, and I think that like John, Jesus had a very special relationship with Mary Magdalene. I think there was something special there. Some would want to make that a sexual thing, but that wouldn't fit with what the Bible talks about. Not because sex is bad or evil, but because Jesus is not portrayed that way. Mary Magdalene. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Why are you crying?" Duh. Why are you crying? Well, see, they have inside information. They know that Jesus isn't in that tomb. She's come expecting to see a tomb with the rock in front of it. In fact, in other versions, the women are wondering, what are they going to do? They've come laden with spices that they will use to embalm the body. But how are we going to move that stone? Well, here in this instance, we see that the angels have already done that. There are two of them, and they ask her, "Why are you crying?" Because she was standing outside the tomb doing exactly that. And she says, "They have taken my Lord away." She didn't say "my friend." She's not saying that. She's not expressing it that way here. She's recognizing him and acknowledging him as her Lord, very personal. And I don't know where they have put him. At this, so she sees the angel, she says this, and then it says, at this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. She's not coming expecting to see a living Jesus. But there's also the kind of the implication that, if you will, that Jesus is a shapeshifter. He can appear, but not appear as they recognize or as they know him. He can appear as someone else, and we're going to see that here. He asks her the same thing the angels did. "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" And she says, "Oh, you're the gardener. Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him. I'll get him. I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Her Lord and her teacher. Rabboni. There's something special happening here, and I'd like you to capture that here in the first write-in, and it's this, that although often unrecognizable at first, Jesus is often unrecognizable at first. Do you think that perhaps he has ever paid you a visit and you didn't recognize him? It's not beyond the pale of possibility. That you've encountered someone, and it might be somebody that you would never think would be Jesus, but isn't that just exactly how he would show up? You'd think he was anybody else but Jesus, even though in your life there's this sense that you're looking for Jesus. You're looking for Jesus, but Jesus shows up here. Although he's often recognizable, although he's obscured, Jesus will reveal himself in his, write this in his, is it number one? Yeah? In his good time, in due time. And he will do it in ways that are personal and suitable to where we are in our Christian walk. He has no reason to come to us speaking way over our heads, and sometimes he dumbed it down so low that, in terms of agricultural terms and so forth, that they had to figure it out because they're looking up here for something really, really big and profound, and yet he's using the simplest little things about a farmer casting seed, about a man plowing and not looking back. He's using these kinds of things to communicate truth to them. So the truth is up here, revealed down here. The truth is his, but it's for us. It's meant to be attainable by us. Jesus will reveal himself in his good time in ways that are personal and suitable to where we are in our Christian walk. Have you experienced that? Some way that there's been a revelation, an aha moment, a circumstance where all of a sudden you realize Jesus was right in the middle of that. Now the little example I gave is really, really small and minuscule, but it seems like it's a bad thing that's happening. But no, he's blessing us. He's blessing us with by rebuilding that. And the question is, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to use it? Would you be praying? Be praying that God would show us how to use that. How to use that space in a way that would glorify him. I have an idea. One thing I learned in working with Brianna, our preschool director, who was also over the after-school daycare. And she came to work here because she loved to be with kids. And circumstances led to her having to become the administrator. In a way, the worst possible job. What you want to do is work with the kids. You want to love the kids. But now you're an administrator. Now you've got personnel problems. Now you got parent problems. Now you got kid problems. Now you got financial problems. Now you got the pastor. Now you got the board. All of these things to deal with. It changes your whole relationship with all of those people. But what she told me was that when intending to continue before COVID, that what she wanted to do was remove herself from that directorship, that administrative job with the over everything, and just manage the after-school daycare. She said it's really the only thing that's profitable. The rest of it we do at great expense to ourselves, and what I realize now, also at great liability. Personnel liability, parent liability, child liability, building liability, everywhere liability. And so it would fall to me to be the overall administrator to hire a new person to do this, who would have to figure out who to hire and run through the paces, and it's not for me. But the idea of an after-school daycare center in the right hands could have great potential. It doesn't require the same level of certification for teachers. And here's the other thing. There was never any future in it for employees who worked here. They worked hard and long for a token salary with no benefits. And so there was a disheartening, and there was a changeover of personnel, and there was all the things that come with being in business. Anyone ever been in business and had to deal with this stuff? How do you like it? You know what? It's not for everybody. I did it for a number of years. It's not for me. Jesus will reveal himself. I got off on a tangent there, but I just wanted to share that little bit with you and have you praying that God would lead the way. You know, so often we do things in the flesh, and I'm in a position to easily get caught up in doing things in the flesh just to make something happen, but I think that everybody needs to be involved in this who would like to see us be more effective in our community, whatever it would be. Now we're going to move from John to Mark. And Mark says this, "Then Mary went and told those who had been with him," that would be the disciples, "and who were mourning and weeping." What is she doing? She's going back to where the disciples are, and they're mourning and weeping. She's going to them, and we're going to get another little piece here. There they are. "And when they heard that Jesus was alive, that she had seen him, they did not believe it." Other versions say that when the women, because at that point there were, in that gospel, there was more than one that came back and reported it, they scoffed and dismissed it. It specifically says they dismissed essentially what the women were saying. So there's nothing to write in here unless you choose, and you've got a space on the front to do it. Disappointment leads to doubt. Do you think there was disappointment? Do you think that the disciples, do you think that Mary, do you think that those who had come to know and love and follow after Jesus, do you think they were disappointed? They expected so much more. They expected good things. Disappointment leads to doubt. That doubt starts to move in. Doubt can lead then to dismissiveness. You become a naysayer. You become contagious in your negativity. And that's what's happening there amongst the disciples. And they did not believe it. But she had seen him. Mary Magdalene had been a reliable source. She had become a very reliable source. And dismissiveness leads to faithlessness and despair. So they all flow out of each other. If you want, just take a picture of it. So I'm going to change the screen. Here we go. Harmony of the Gospels is going to switch to Luke's version now. And we're going to pick it up from there, where let's recognize that amongst the disciples, Peter and John were there. She went and she saw the 11. The 11. Peter and John. Captured by Luke. It says Peter and John. I added John. Luke just says Peter. But we know that we see the picture we've read where Peter and John are running to the tomb. And John, being younger, outruns Peter and gets there first but stands back. I don't know if out of reverence or what. But when Peter comes up, of course, he just charges right in. Well, here, Peter and John got up, went to the tomb, and bending over, Peter saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away wondering to himself what had happened. You know, we've been using that word ponder, to let something remain alive that has impacted you, and you don't have the answer, but there's clearly something that needs an answer, and you've only seen a portion of it. Disappointment, write this in. Disappointment, doubt, and despair. I call them the 3 Ds. They promote the death of faith. It kind of emulates what I've already said here, but in a little different arrangement, and you get to write it in. Disappointment. When you have disappointment in your life, oftentimes doubt will follow. And doubt can lead you into a state of despair or depression, discouragement. There's a whole bunch of D's that fit right in here. That was one of my favorite grades, D. You know, I got a D in conduct. The 3 D's that promote the death of faith go in this direction. Must not go unchallenged. And we saw Peter do that. We saw Peter challenge this. There was this contagion, this discouragement, this disillusionment, all of these D things, this dismissiveness, this doubt. And he takes all that. Now, who had a reason to feel those more than Peter? The one who had denied Christ. Wow. Put all those D's together and you got a pretty drastic situation. Peter had every reason to be the most depressed of all, but he runs to the tomb because maybe what she's saying is true. And I need to know for myself, are there any skeptics in the room? I was told once that by someone that being a skeptic is a bad thing, but I am not convinced. Have you ever been duped? Anyone ever lied to you, cheated you, betrayed you, stolen from you?
What about the Bereans? They checked everything.
Yeah, the Bereans checked those things out. They had reason to be skeptical, but they were of a more noble character than the Thessalonians. We want to be people of a noble character, more noble than those who will be quick to just say, well, forget about it. It's over. We lost. We bet on the wrong horse. Too bad for us. And here we are in hiding because we're next. He challenged it, and so hold on to this idea. The 3 D's that promote the death of faith must not go unchallenged. Your skepticism can go too far, and you can become a dismisser. You can become a detractor. You can feed the contagion. But it can also do some good if you'll just check your assumptions or check the assumptions of others. Well, here's another example that fits into this genre of people who had doubt, people who had been there with Jesus, people who were disappointed, people who were going their own way now that the game had changed. And this term way is kind of big for me here, and you might not pick it up. But many, many years ago, I have this recollection. I wasn't a believer at the time, but I knew God was there. But he hadn't been revealed to me. He hadn't revealed himself to me in a way that I could quite grasp, but he was like knocking on the door. And I built this grand tree house, and I was up in the loft of the tree house. I was going to sleep out there one night. And I remember, this is a kind of a vivid memory, I remember saying, God, would you reveal yourself to me? Would you be real to me? And now, I know our minds can play tricks on us. We can think we've heard something. It's not even out loud, it's not audible, but there's something that happens in our minds. And maybe our mind doesn't even play a trick on us. Maybe it's just bubbling up from within what God wants to say to us. And he says, you'll find it on the way. Find what? Truth. You'll find me. But it's not going to be right now all at once. I'm giving you this to hold on to. Anchor your faith on this, that the things that have happened prior to this, the parents you've had, the home you've grown up, the community, they have all been building to where it's your question now. Baptism will be a decision you make that was made for you once before as a child. But you'll make it for yourself. I didn't know all those things at the time. God doesn't reveal himself all at once, and I'm going to have you capture that also. On the road to Emmaus, it says now, that same day, the same day that he had appeared to them, apparently, Two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. How long does it take to walk 7 miles? Especially if you're talking. You've been inside. All these amazing things have happened. Women have come and they've told you something and you don't quite understand it. And now they're going to Emmaus. I don't know if they live there or what they're doing, but they're going to Emmaus, talking about everything that had happened. And as they walked and talked, Jesus came and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. There he is. He's going to be walking right alongside of them, talking with them. He asks them, "What are you discussing?" Jesus always draws us out. He says, "So what's going on? What's up with you guys? Where are you going? What's up?" They stood still, their faces downcast. What's that tell you? They were disheartened. He's saying, "What are you talking about?" And if they've got to relate all that to him, it's sad news. It's not good news as they see it. See, the good news comes to us in a masked form. It had to involve his death, his brutal death, his trial, his crucifixion, but then he promised his rising. What are you discussing? They stood still, their face downcast. And one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "No. What happened?" Jesus. "Are you the only one?" Now Cleopas, where have you heard his name before? Me neither. Me neither. But I always wonder about things like that. Is Cleopas, and is he somebody we've met before? And I can't find a Cleopas except for Wikipedia. Cleopas? Who's Cleopas? Here is a painting. Cleopas the Apostle from the Supper at Emmaus by Caravaggio in London, of London in 1601. He knows about Cleopas from church tradition. We've never heard of him before. We're not big on those church traditions, I guess. But here's what it says about him. According to some church traditions, Cleopas is considered the brother of Saint Joseph. I added this part at the bottom, the husband of Mary. Who's Saint Joseph? There's so many saints. Amongst the plethora of saints, well, Joseph, the surrogate father of Jesus, Cleopas is considered by some to be the brother of Joseph. Well, just take it at face value. That means that Cleopas was also a disciple of Jesus. Now, we have the 12 that were appointed as apostles that we call disciples, but there was a host of people who had gathered around Jesus, who had been impacted by him, Mary Magdalene being just one of them. Blind beggars, lepers, all kinds of people. Tax collectors. Well, here's Cleopas. Doesn't that add a little dimension to all this? Otherwise, it's just two guys. Hey, and that's what the little bit of research and having a question and not just satisfied to ponder it without investigating it can do for you. Well, Jesus says, "What things?" he asked. "Well, about Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people." They call him a prophet. Jesus was a prophet, and that's what many people called when he says, who do they say I am? Well, some say a prophet, and some say John the Baptist, and some say Elijah, and so on and so forth. Well, they call him a prophet, one powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. But I'm wondering if they're having to reduce him here. He was a prophet, a wonderful prophet. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But then it says this, "But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what's more, this is the third day since all this took place." What's the significance of that? It's the third day. There's been no sign of him. Well, he was a good prophet as far as being that risen Savior, that one who would redeem Israel, that Messiah figure that we were convinced of pretty much. Well, some of us doubted it a little, and some of us more than others, but him, we had high hopes in him. And it's now the third day. In addition, they say, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen visions of angels who said he was alive. All right. Now that certainly makes things just a little questionable, wouldn't it, if this is the report you got? We went to the tomb, the gate was open, the stone was rolled away, we saw some angels, and they said he's alive, but we didn't see him. Well, it's not unreasonable that people would have been a little dismissive of that. You know what? It's dangerous out there, and probably the most dangerous place will be around that tomb, where there could be a crowd of people, and not all of them friendly. There could be guards, there could be the Jewish priests, there could be all those people who we have been polarized as enemies of. And why would we want to go there? It's maybe one thing for you women to go there, but not a good idea for us. Hey, you know what? I want us all to consider the reasonableness of all this. You know, they're not just a bunch of empty-headed ignoramus that are faithless. They look at the reality. They have reasons to be skeptical, especially when the story is like this. They saw angels. She saw angels. You follow me, right? Yeah. Let's not be so quick to just scan over it and say, those guys. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. Well, that would be Peter, wouldn't it? That'd be John. I'm not sure where it occurs, and I shouldn't even mention it, but there are places where it's reported that, and Peter saw Jesus. Jesus revealed himself to Peter. But here, this is what we have from Cleopas and the other disciple, unnamed. The 3 Ds are contagious. Number 3. These 3 Ds, do you remember what they are? Doubt, disappointment, and despair. The 3 Ds are contagious and deadly. Good news of new life deserves investigation. I'm crediting Peter once again, but I'm also reminding you, emphasizing this point, that the good news of new life deserves investigation. If you hear of a baby being born, especially you ladies, you can't wait to meet that baby. Good news, a new baby born. Now, so often Jesus had to put up with these guys, these people, and so I've had a little fun with this. And he saith unto them, Oy vey, you idiots. Some of the oldest documents do not include this remark. But he says this, how foolish you are. Remember, they've told him the account of the day. They're filling him in because he doesn't seem to know anything about it. And he says, how foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. He references the Old Testament prophets that they've had, speaking to them, revealing to them that the Messiah would come and have to go through all these things. You should expect that before he enters into his glory. And so he tells them the whole story. And so they're approaching Emmaus, and as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going further. It seems like Jesus is using a ruse. He says, I want to see what these guys want to do next, and I'm just going to act like I met them along the road. They told me their story. I told them what I needed to tell them, and now, adios, guys. He's going to go on his way. Well, you know what happens here, don't you? Yeah. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. Sounds like he might be spending the night. Take note, we're nearing the end of the day. It's nearly evening. Don't continue on in the dark. Come and stay with us. Hospitality was so big. They urged him strongly. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and when they recognized him, he disappeared from their sight. Oh, Jesus. Now he's going to just disappear? Going to tell us all these things? But this is what's happening. There has been a sequential revelation to them, and they asked each other, "Weren't our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" That was a big thing all by itself. It was a sequential revelation by degree. The first phase, he meets them on the road, and he's opening the scriptures to them, reminding them of what the prophets have said, making some greater sense of all of it. And then he breaks bread, and their eyes are opened. It's not that long ago that he broke bread with them, the Last Supper. Probably more than just the 12, posing for that picture. You know the one I'm talking about, right? We're all sitting at that long table. That, whatever it is. You know, it's funny, when I look at some of the pictures of Jesus and the people are with him, the artists at the time depict it as they would in their time. So sometimes people have these great hats. It's like, no. They didn't have hats like that in those days. They wore a turban or a headband or nothing, but they didn't have brimmed hats or helmets the way we would see it in those pictures. But the artists always want to make it relevant to the people who would be looking at it. Well, so they've said this, and here's what I want to say to you. Your faith will be refreshed as you encounter the risen Lord anew along the way. This was the voice. You'll find it along the way. You'll find me along. I'll find you. That's probably more like it. You didn't choose me. I chose you. I'll find you along the way. You'll find me. You'll discover. We'll have this encounter. And your faith will be refreshed. Now, this is for us especially as we encounter the risen Lord, seeing him in this new light. This light of newness, when it's refreshed for us anew as we're going about our daily business. If you have your eyes open, if you're paying attention, if you're present, so often we're not present. We're thinking of the next thing, we're wound up in the last thing, but we're not here now. And so we miss a lot. This is, I just use this, it's where that piece will end. They got up. Who got up? Think about this. These guys, it's nearly evening. It's the end of the day. It says they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. That's 7 miles that they walked to get to Emmaus. Now they returned at once to Jerusalem, according to Luke. And there they found the 11. They knew where to go to find them. They're not part of the 11. But they're ones who were part of Jesus' entourage. And they found those with them assembled together, and then they said, "It's true. The Lord has risen." And here's where it says, "It has appeared to Simon." We'll just set that aside because that's another story, another bit of harmony that I haven't woven in here. Then the two told them what happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. They recognized Jesus. It's what had happened as they went on their way. They encountered Jesus. So we're going to change the tone here a little bit because Jesus is now going to appear to his disciples. And once again, using the harmony, we go back to John chapter 20, and it will go like this. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together, there they are in that room. We can presume perhaps the Cleopas and the others, and who knows who else. Mary Magdalene, many others might have been there. They were in that room. I choose John here because he makes the point. They were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders. They were afraid of being found. Now we're going to switch back to Luke, but I wanted to get that piece in there. Jesus came and stood among them, and he said, Shalom. This was our greeting this morning. Peace be with you. Shalom, my friend. Peace be with you. He's coming in there, and he can tell right away that, you can feel a tension in the air. And, you can walk into a room, and nobody knows that you're there, and there's a tension in there. How about when you just appear through the walls? They really can't hide that. He feels the tension and the fear, and he says, peace be with you. They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. And he said to them, why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your mind? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I, myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. I want you to take note of it. I may remind you of it later. He sees the doubt. He sees their troubles, that they're troubled. He sees the fear that they're hiding. He knows where to go, but not everybody else does. And he says, touch me. He gives them the invitation, touch me. See. I'm not a ghost. Look at my hands and my feet. And when he said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And still, they did not believe it. I didn't make this up. It's John 20:41. And they still did not believe it. But because of their joy and amazement, all right, this is as good as it gets for you. I will work with you. I'm not done with you. You're having doubts. This is all too much. Stories of visions of angels and me suddenly appearing before you, and you think I'm a ghost, but you know what? I'm not a ghost. Check me out. But because of their joy and amazement, he asked them, and he's going to make his point, but he's going to change the tone a little bit. He asked them, do you have anything here to eat? I love that. And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. He is a resurrected Jesus in a body that can be unrecognizable and yet very recognizable and very confusing still. And they give him a piece of broiled fish, and he eats it right there in their presence. He says, I'm hungry. I love it. And the ichthus, these are Greek words. Each of these, this word ixoi, it's pronounced ichthus. Each one of those has a meaning. But the fish has become a symbol. Now you might never have seen this verse because it kind of seems fresh to me. That he asks for food and eats a fish in their presence. But fish has always been a part of the life. It's Galilee, the Sea of Galilee. John and James are fishermen. It's a very common way of life. And so Christians would use a symbol over their door to designate that we're believers in Christ. And it would be a way that was a sort of a codified way. Now, Jesus has appeared to all the disciples. He's appeared to Mary Magdalene. He's appeared to Cleopas and the other one. And now he's going to appear to Thomas because Thomas wasn't there in that room. And that's why we have terms like a doubting Thomas. That's where this comes from. It's a skeptic who refuses to believe without direct personal experience. It's a reference to the Gospel of John's depiction of the Apostle Thomas. A doubting Thomas. Have you ever been called one of those? Or called someone a doubting Thomas? It's not an unfamiliar term, is it? No, Thomas gets to wear this for the rest of his life and beyond. But Thomas does many more very, very important things. And so in a way, I want us to look at him the way we looked at Judas Iscariot, because this Thomas is not going as far as Judas Iscariot went in his doubt and dismissal. But Thomas is saying, I'm going to have to see it for myself. That's not unreasonable to my way of thinking. All right. I'm not wanting to say that you're all liars, but I got to see it for myself, because this one doesn't make sense. And in John's account, he refused to believe the resurrected Jesus had appeared to the other 10 until he could see and feel Jesus' crucifixion wounds for himself. Here's how it reads. That was just a little intro that I put in there about Thomas. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. I will not believe without this proof." Here again, disappointment leads to doubt. Doubt leads to despair. Thomas is tipping. He's teetering at the edge of all this. And then it says a week later his disciples were in the house again and Thomas was with them. So a week later, Jesus has appeared. No, Jesus is about to appear to Thomas. He has met with them and told them all these things. I'm not going to believe it unless I feel it and see for myself. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and this time Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, once again, "Shalom, peace be with you." You know, we can never get enough of that, can we? We need it to be repeated again and again and again. Fear not. Don't be afraid. Don't be anxious. Peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, and here's another famous piece of art, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Not unreasonable for Thomas to need the same thing the other disciples were invited to do, is it? Stop doubting and believe. I think Jesus makes great allowance for all of us in this arena. And it says, this is how Thomas responded. It just all of a sudden, Thomas responded and said to him, "My Lord and my God." He declares Jesus, the risen Jesus, to be his Lord and his God. And Jesus says to him, "You have seen me, Thomas, so you've believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." You know, could he be talking about us? Could he be talking about the people who will read about this, won't actually see, except by my own personal revelation to them? They won't have anything but a picture, which is probably very inaccurate. And some of the pictures of Jesus I just really do not like. It doesn't look like a Jesus that I could relate to. So we're going to go on to the one of our last fill-ins in here. And I want you to consider that it's for our sake that Jesus rarely reveals all of himself all at once. It would be too much. It's already too much. They can't comprehend it. Even with all of it, they still don't believe. So it's for our sake, because we have limitations. And here's what he says. When he's explained some things about end times, he says, "I have much more to say to you, more than you can now bear." Jesus protects us from being overwhelmed by the truth and the reality. And I think many of us would say, you know, I never would have taken that job if I'd only known. I never would have become a believer if I had realized what it was going to require of me. If it had all been there for us all at one time up front, we might not have followed. I don't know. Maybe you think, boy, I wish you'd given it to me all at once. Even Paul didn't get it all at once. Jesus got his attention. For it took a period of time before the scales fell from his eyes, and then Jesus told, was it Ananias, who he sent him into Damascus to meet, that he would show him how much he must suffer. Not going to give it to him all at once. Going to let him digest some of this. Jesus would have us persevere in faith, beyond our doubts and disappointments, to believe and share the good news. Did I write to believe and live and share? Yeah. Yeah, to believe. It's one thing to believe, it's another thing to live it, to make that belief a reality, the centerpiece of our life, which is Him living through us. And then you've got something to share. In fact, it just happens. It just becomes a natural thing to share the good news of what's going on in your life. Here's the good news. I am risen. I don't know if I gave you the for personal affirmation down at the bottom. Did I? For personal affirmation? Good. Going to remind you, disappointment, doubt, and despair, the 3 Ds that promote the death of faith must not go unchallenged. But down here, for personal affirmation, Jesus is risen and alive, and why don't you write this in? So am I. You're born again. You're born again. The first piece of the eternity that Jesus came to unfold within your awareness, within your comprehension, has already begun. And so am I. Why don't you say it? Jesus is risen and alive, and so am I. Tell a friend. Well, with that, I'll invite those who are going to take the offering to come forward. There's a request.